When the rest of the town goes dark and the trees swallow the roads, the rules that keep you safe feel different. There are fewer witnesses, fewer headlights to interrupt a shape at the edge of your vision. You think distance equals privacy. Sometimes it means nobody will ever see what happens. Tonight I want to tell you 3 true accounts from isolated places. First-person memories that end without tidy answers, where the scariest thing is the sense of being watched long after everyone else has gone home. If you like hearing real, slow-burn horror from places people forget, subscribe and stay with me. There's more like this every week. The first story comes from a high school friend. He called me once, years after it happened, and the way he spoke made it clear he'd been carrying the night with him ever since. He asked me not to use his name, but he didn't mind me repeating Johnny's, the kid who vanished. This is how he remembers that field. There was a lamp on the bleachers that threw an orange circle across the outfield, like a little sun stuck in the night. It didn't light the whole place. Only the row of metal seats, the worn path to the concession stand, and the first 20 feet of dirt behind home plate. Everything outside that halo turned to an ink that the town remembered later as the place you don't go. We thought of it as ours. Between junior year and senior year, a group of us would meet there after curfew. Smoke if you wanted to, play the radio too loud, dare each other to run the bases with shoes off, or just sit and watch the orange lamp turn the ash on the ground into tiny moons. It felt protective, like the town's neglect had left us a pocket of freedom. Johnny was the weird one who made it feel safe. He was all teeth and nervous laughs, the kind of kid who could turn a dare into a joke so it didn't feel dangerous. One Friday, he told us he would make it down after work. He worked late at the hardware store, but by the time the hour stretched past midnight, he still wasn't there. We figured he'd fallen asleep in the truck or decided to watch a movie at someone's house because teenagers vanish into couches and basements all the time. We called him. No answer. We drove by the store and his truck wasn't there. The next day someone had noticed a flat on the highway and assumed he'd had car trouble. He didn't call. That first 24 hours felt like a long, quiet animal padding through the neighborhood. You know something's missing before you face that it might be gone. The searches were awkward and small at first. Flashlights bobbing between pine trunks, the sheriff patting down the bleacher aisles the way you press on wrapped presents, hoping to hear the rattle of something alive. We combed the parking lots and the boat ramps and the old drainage culvert behind the field. His parents drove around in the same truck he'd driven, the headlights cutting the dark like slow knives. No sign. You learn to measure that kind of silence in different ways. The empty chair at the cafe, the voice that used to order fries and doesn't, the way a playlist sits incomplete. After a few days I went back, not because I thought I'd find him, but because the bleachers were where you went to remember him as he'd been. Laughing, daring, not a missing person. It was about 2 in the morning when I parked in the gravel lot, the car crunching louder than I expected. The orange lamp was on, buzzing faintly. The field smelled of crushed beer cans and wet grass. I wandered under the glow and up onto the metal steps. That's when I noticed people in the stands. They were spread out, not moving much, hands folded in laps or slouched on the seats. At first I thought they were dozing, or maybe some late-night soccer crowd that had wandered in. But the way they sat was wrong. Too still, like they had been placed there to watch something. Their faces vanished into the orange hue. Their eyes were dark hollows. One of them wore a cap pulled low, another rocked slightly like a mechanical toy. Near the center of the row there was a man who shouldn't have been there at all. Thin, with a janitor's jumpsuit and an odd smile that made his face look too wide. He had this loose, almost celebratory movement. He kept shifting his weight and making a small, rhythmical step that reminded me of dancing. He wasn't dancing in a party way. It was a private, gleeful little routine the way someone might hum to themselves while sweeping. I remember the way my chest tightened, the sound in my ears. I walked closer and the smell changed. Something oily under the lamp like damp metal and cigarette smoke. The others on the benches didn't react. When the janitor, that's all anyone knew to call him, turned his head, it was the first time I saw his eyes, and they were very plain, the color of wet concrete, unreadable. He looked at me the way people look at things they have no use for and yet can't quite ignore. I asked if he'd seen Johnny. He laughed the smallest laugh and said nothing helpful. I left. Later I would discover a photo. It was a yearbook, the kind we all flipped through once and then left on the shelf. A friend had scanned it for me and sent the image at 2 in the morning. In the montage of candid shots from a summer cleanup day, there in the background of a group photo taken at the same bleachers, was the janitor. He was in mid-step, caught like a ghost whose mouth found the shape of a grin. Nobody we could find could place him as an employee. No payroll records, no one remembered hiring him, no one in administration could give a name. He was a recurring shadow in memory, but not in the ledger. Then a month later I saw a picture in a diner window. A rusted pickup parked under the orange lamp. The same license plate my friend had told me was attached to Johnny's truck months before. 4-pack 207. I thought it was a coincidence. Later someone told me they'd seen that truck rolling slow down Main Street, and inside was a man who matched the janitor in the bleacher photo. The same lean shoulders, the same tilt of the head when the window rolled down. I called everyone I knew. The sheriff checked whatever they check and came back to tell me there was no record of the janitor under that description. The truck? It was registered to a private owner outside of town. When they traced it, the trail went cold. The license plate had been reported as belonging to Johnny's truck by family friends who'd been close with him. How it appeared later on a truck driven by a man who seemed to be the janitor we couldn't confirm. That's the hard, jagged piece. Things lining up where logic should fill the gaps. But the law and the documents refused to help. We never found Johnny. People stopped talking openly about it. His locker at school sat shut and untouched, a minor shrine to the kid who kept showing up for the rest of us. The bleachers stopped feeling like ours. I go back sometimes when no one's around. Not because I expect an answer, but because places keep memory like dirt. The lamp still hums in my head sometimes, an orange circle where my fear sits. The others on those bleachers, the still ones, are things I try to account for with daylight explanations. Vagrants, kids, the town's lost souls. But there's a gnawing part that says some things we're deliberately watching, learning how we moved. We never proved anything. The sheriff couldn't make connections. The records left rooms of empty air. For years I stopped taking the back roads alone. If I have one true regret, it's that I left when my instincts told me otherwise and didn't drag one more person into that orange light to force the world to see. The pain of not knowing is a different kind of horror. You invent 1,000 ends, none of them satisfactory. I don't go near the bleachers anymore. I can't. The town still plays under the lamp. Somewhere, maybe, the janitor still moves in that private rhythm, and Johnny is folded into an absence everyone can feel but nobody can fix. When you're far from people, being watched doesn't have to mean eyes you can name. It can be a rhythm you notice where one shouldn't exist. The sense of someone timing your breath. That's what led my next friend to call me, years ago. 4 interns, a swamp, and a pickup truck that shouldn't have been there. We were summer interns at Kennedy, the kind of jobs that let you work by day and feel bored by night, so we drove out to Tate's Hell to see the sky. Tate's Hell is a place people mention like a dare. It's one of those names that sounds older than anyone who uses it, a press of history in the way the swamp breathes. The plan was stupidly simple. Drive out, set a blanket on the hood, point at constellations we'd learned in an astronomy elective, drink warm beer, make jokes about rockets and alien landings. There were 4 of us. Jake, who thought every road should be run at speed limit plus 10. Sam, who kept a pack of nuts in his pocket like a squirrel. Marcos, quiet unless provoked. And me, who liked the idea of being alone with the sky without thinking about the workday. We left late, the highway spilling us off into a 2-lane that unraveled into dirt. When we pulled into a turnoff, the only sound was the swamp breathing and the far thin buzzing of frogs. We set up on a little rise that looked down over a black water mirror. The Milky Way ran across the sky like spilled sugar. For the first hour it was a perfect cliché. Someone pointed out Orion, someone else swore they saw a shooting star, somebody made a joke that landed and then expanded into the kind of laughter that won't stop because no one's counting time. Then headlights came. At first we thought it was an ordinary truck using the same river road, and we waved. The lights slowed but didn't pass. They sat at the tree line, a pair of eyes reflecting. The truck's engine idled, its glow puddling on the road. After a few minutes there was another set of lights behind us, far away but purposeful in the dark. We called out. There was no answer. Then the headlights blinked in a pattern that made no sense, like a strobe unconnected to any hazard. Sam said it looked like Morse code, but not in any language we recognized, just deliberate blinks that felt personal. When you sit in the dark and someone else has headlights, your first instinct is curiosity. Who? Your brain asks. Then another instinct clears a space for fear. Why are they staying? The truck crept closer along a side trail and pulled to the edge of a ditch so that 2 shallow beams came across the swamp. We could see silhouettes in the cab. Maybe 2 people, maybe more. They were hunched, the kind of posture people adopt when they don't want to be seen. The 4 of us joked about poachers, about some redneck couple trying to scare interns from the woods. We were making the jokes partly to stop our own minds from making worse stories, the ones that mention knives and intentions and histories. It didn't matter what the truck was. What mattered was the way it started to find us. One headlight would appear past a tree, then disappear. We got the radios out, static whispering between channels, and the truck seemed to answer in that language with a low rolling hum of its engine. Twice it circled us on tracks that weren't roads, coming up behind the rise where we sat and making us feel corralled. Marcus swore he could hear voices on the wind. Not words, but breathy syllables like someone trying to mimic the frogs. He kept saying, "They're talking between themselves." The voices, if there were voices, were patient and not hurried. That patient quality is what made it worse. It felt like the truck was marking time, waiting to see what we would become when we were afraid. We decided to leave. That's the part that makes me bristle whenever anyone calls us brave. Leaving was the only sane choice. But leaving meant stumbling through a maze of roots and mud, and the truck followed, lights cutting swaths through the pines. At one point a headlight came so close it painted Marcus's face a ghostly white. And I remember with a clarity that still makes me look over my shoulder the way his mouth hung open, the way he moved like a puppet whose strings were jerked by panic. There were sounds I'll never forget. The tires slipping in mire, the splash of a shallow bank, the way someone, I still don't know who, tapped the hood of the truck with something hollow, deliberately, a slow drum that made the ground feel less stable. We ran. The path is a maze. You learn the hard way that the shortest way out is rarely the one your adrenaline picks. At one fork the truck blocked us, its headlights a wall. We turned down a wash and hit a new road that spat us out into pavement like a throat clearing. When the streetlights hit, the truck's lights cut off at once and the silhouettes in the cab were gone. There were no footprints to follow, no tire tracks that led back into the trees, just an area of flattened grass and the impression of something that had been trying our patience, seeing whether we would become interesting enough to pursue. After we got back to town, none of us wanted to talk about details. To this day, Jake says he can taste metal when he thinks about that night. Sam had trouble sleeping for a month. Marcus started checking the back seat of his car every time he got in. I kept waking up convinced I could hear an engine idling outside the house. We never filed a report that took more than 10 minutes and an officer's bored nod. There was nothing to file beyond the feeling of being stalked. People suggested crazy things, local hunters, a prank, some antiquated folklore tied to Tate's hell that people like to retell. It doesn't matter which is right. The truth, the part that clings, is that for those hours the swamp felt like a mouth with a few teeth. Not violent in the way a bite is violent, but a place that could close if you weren't careful. The aftermath wasn't just fear. It was a long, quiet recalibration. We stopped venturing into places where a person could be alone with the dark. For months after, every time a truck idled just past a turnoff while I drove alone at night, my foot would find the gas without me thinking. We all carry little rituals now. A flashlight in the glove box, a friend told where we'll be, a lie about arrival times. The thing that gnaws is that the truck's choices were ambiguous. It could have been a human threat, people who like to watch, to mark, to warn. Or it could have been something older, a history of the place that wants to be kept secret. Tate's Hell is a name that works like a warning sign. Once you've been there at night and felt what the dark will permit, that name carries weight. Whatever followed us that night left no body, no crime scene, nothing to submit to logic. It left the knowledge that somewhere you are not alone, and sometimes whoever's watching will stop because they decide you're boring, not because they were ever compelled to explain themselves. That's the thing about isolated places. They let other histories reach into yours. For the third account, the narrator spoke in a quieter voice and asked that the place be described with care. He had returned home to help at his family's small hotel in a rural part of Japan. A building perched on a slope where winter made the roads thin and the villages moved like slow dreams. His father ran the inn. Business was quiet, tourists fewer in the off-season. He had been back for weeks, walking the village with a thermos and a notebook, the kind of son who went home and listened. The mountain paths behind the hotel ran into ruins, fragments of stone walls, mossed steps, and a few anonymous shrines where people had left coins and rice for the dead. He wanted to retrace history, to connect the small place with the larger story of the island. One morning after a heavy snowfall, he decided to take a different path. It's easy to romanticize these walks. Snow muffles the world and makes it small and manageable. He went off the trail, 5 minutes of careful footwork into a stand of bare trees that let the sky in. A narrow opening in the earth breathed a blackness that didn't belong in daylight. He crouched and saw a mouth of stone, a low cave carved into the hillside and framed by blocks that could have been part of a foundation. He thought it might be the remnants of a small burial chamber or an old storage recess. The mouth was half hidden by a fallen cedar and a curtain of brown needles. It smelled like wet stone and old tea. A human place, not purely animal. He crawled in. The space opened into a small chamber with flat stones laid as if in an altar. On the top stone, arranged with a care that made his skin prickle, were coins with square holes, the kind you see in old photos, dark with age, threaded at the center as if they'd been offered and bundled. A long blade lay beside them, not gleaming but dull with a patina that suggested age and use. There were small bones too, thin fragments that could be animal, could be human. He wouldn't say confidently to me which, only that they were unmistakable the way a certain pattern becomes a language. He took a step back and felt the hair on his arms tighten. There are smells that stop time. Inside the chamber there was an animalistic odor under the stones, a tang of iron and earth, and something older and more sour than decay. The smell you get when water sits with leaves in the dark for a long time. He described it as a pressure in his chest, like someone breathing down his neck that wasn't a person. In the narrowness of the cave, sound behaved wrong. His footsteps echoed without cause. And somewhere, deep and measured, there was a thumping. Not the quick, irregular knock someone might make to call for attention, but a slow drum that seemed to come from deeper underground or from the rhythm of something that was inhabiting the bones of the hill. He left the coins where they were. He took only one photograph because the act of capturing felt like stealing something alive. He went back to the hotel and found it strangely easier to do small tasks than talk about what he'd seen. That evening he woke to the sound of someone pushing on his door. He looked through the peephole and saw nothing but footprints in the snow leading away, as if someone had come close, checked the door, and left a message in the shape of the step. A week later his room was forced open. The lock was smashed clean. Nothing of great value was taken. They walked the room like they were searching for something. Papers ruffled, a necklace taken down from a hook and then laid on the floor. The photograph he had taken missing. The innkeeper, his father, asked the police, who came and took statements and left with a profession of concern and no answers. No one in the town wanted to say much about the cave. Some elders warned him not to go back. Others shrugged and explained it away as some kind of vagrant mischief. He chose to leave. You can imagine the rational explanations. Kids with a penchant for mischief, the homeless passing through, or even a wildlife scavenging things into the night. Each is possible, but he told me the part that matters to him. The way the place felt like an invitation he had no right to accept. It was as if the stones meant for somebody else's grief and were put on a little altar where a living person shouldn't have been. After the break-in, he sold his plane ticket and left the town for good. He still gets a hollow feeling when someone brings him a brass coin with a square hole in the center, a small object that will always carry the memory of that cave. There's a common chord across these stories, a blurred line between being observed and being claimed, and a place that remembers. Bleachers, swamp, cave, different geographies, same consequence. Isolation magnifies the small, important things. A license plate reads like a code. A truck's idle becomes a pulse. A mud-sealed cave with coins becomes a ledger of old debt. Each narrator lives with a new measurement for ordinary nights. They walk different streets now, sleep with lights on, check the rear view, reroute their instincts to avoid places that once felt safe. The terror isn't always physical harm. Very often it's the compulsion to keep checking the empty chair, the way you replay a smile and try and fail to find where the rhythm of normal life bent. What ties them together is not a single villain or a single supernatural logic. It's that being far from other people strips away the ordinary checks. The neighbor who drops by, the passerby who will call out, the witness who will hold a light. That absence leaves space for watchers, for histories, for people who prefer the dark. It also allows the mind to wander into scenarios that we cannot undo. The people in these accounts, Johnny and his bleachers, the 4 interns, the traveler and the cave, each walked into spaces that had their own slow grammars, and those grammars rewrote the night. There are questions that will not leave them. For the young man who went to the bleachers, the question is whether the dancing man was a man at all or a face people saw because they wanted to. For the interns at Tate's Hell, the question is who was marking their movements and why they let the truck go when it did. For the traveler in the mountain village, the question is who smashed the door and what they wanted from a photograph. These are questions that have no satisfactory ledger. They live instead as a set of precautions, of rituals, and of memories that sharpen like a tool meant for a different purpose. So what do you do? There's the practical. Tell someone where you're going. Don't go alone to places that are rarely traveled. Keep a light on, leave a line of witnesses in the form of a text message. But there's another, less tangible lesson, which is to listen when a place feels wrong, and to trust that a quiet feeling in the back of your neck is sometimes memory speaking through your body. Isolation gives you space to think, but it also gives danger room to move. Respect those margins. The last image I'll leave you with is simple. The orange lamp over the bleachers, humming and constant. A pickup's headlights cutting the swamp into islands of panic. A hollow stone box with coins laid on top like an offering someone forgot to claim. They're ordinary objects made strange because of what happened around them. They watch back in their way, and because there are no witnesses, the watching hangs heavier. If you've ever been in an empty place and felt eyes where there should be none, or if you have a story from a road less traveled, say it here, in the comments, and please be respectful of anyone who might have been hurt. Like, subscribe, and share this if you want more true accounts from places that people forget until something terrible happens. For those who live near bleachers and swamps and old stone, be careful. Ask where you're going to sleep tonight, and who will know if you don't come back. What watches when no one's watching is not always a monster with a face. Sometimes it's the town's silence, a patient truck, or a rhythm someone keeps when everyone else has turned away.